Part 2 of our journey to Holyhead. We start at Crewe and travel through the Cheshire countryside to the historic medieval city of Chester. Along the North Wales coastline, through caravan heaven at Rhyl and Prestatyn. Witness how Robert Stevenson amalgamated Conway Castle into the railway, and the amazing Britannia Bridge to mark the entrance to Anglesey, and our final stopping point of Holyhead at the gateway by ferry to Ireland. And hello, welcome back to Crewe Station. I say welcome back, that's if you're watching part 2 of our trip from London Euston to Holyhead, and hope very much you watched part 1. It was almost 2 months ago when I recorded the first part, so about time that I carried on the journey through to Holyhead. We're in diesel mode, we're in the class 805 in Avanti West Coast livery, and of course in reality that will be happening this summer. We are due away at 16:52. Let's get underway. There's a slow departure out of Crewe, 20 miles an hour. And we've got about 20 miles to go for our first stop at Chester. I mean, the only two sections of the line that are in England on this stretch are actually Crewe and Chester. We've got the Crewe Heritage Centre with the advanced passenger train there on the right, well worth a visit. Some years ago since I've had a trip to there, I must say, although it's only down the road. And we did spy Crewe Alexandra football ground as we looked over the station at the very start at Gresty Road. And this part of the line is pretty much what remains of Crewe Locomotive Works. I don't really know what they do there nowadays. And it's nothing like it was in the 1980s, where there was all sorts of loco building going on. I can remember walking through when the Class 56s were being built. So it's just about 20 miles to our first stop at Chester, 105 miles to Holyhead, and we'll be calling today at Chester, Flint, Prestatyn, Rhyl, Colwyn Bay, Llandudno Junction, Bangor and Holyhead. And we've got 90 miles an hour speed limit now, and that's pretty much about the fastest that we'll go. It's an up and down speed limit during this journey. I know quite a bit of what was Crewe Locomotive Works is part of a retail park nowadays. Of course, these Class 805s, well, we were all electric from London Euston through to Crewe, and then now we can take advantage of the diesel mode, and seems very much the sensible way of doing things. These hybrid units operate the electric portion in electric mode, the diesel part in diesel mode. Kind of what they did in the 1960s and most of the 1970s, really, when they first electrified the line, because they used to just swap locos at Crewe. Then during the 1980s they started doing things like using HSTs and Voyagers in more recent times, so of course going over the full section of the line in diesel mode. This seems to be a lot more environmentally friendly. Relatively flat, this part of the route, as we take in the Cheshire countryside. Of course, eventually when we get into North Wales we'll hug the coastline and the A55 dual carriageway. There are no stations as well between Crewe and Chester, and that seems to be quite a remarkable fact when there is 20 miles of run. Of course, you still have shuttle services that solely run between Crewe and Chester. They very much thrive in popularity to this day. I think we do pass the platforms of Euston Castle near Tarpley. I think there has been the go-ahead given to reopen that station, so that should happen. There's always been talk about electrifying the North Wales coastline. Of course, it's an important freight connection as well with the port of Holyhead. Still remains an interesting line. It's not quite what it was in the 1980s when British Rail Blue dominated the scene with the Class 40s, the 45s, 47s. think the one thing you will observe in this journey throughout really to Wales is the up and down nature of the speed limit. This is typified by the 65 coming up. And again, I'm going to try and pretty much use the speed control as much as we can, but not for the braking. Kind of not change that speed control setting away from 90. We'll keep it at that because we've got a 90 again coming up, to try and keep that at whatever the regular speed is, if you like. Is this the old platforms at Euston Castle? I don't know if there was other stations between Crewe and Chester. I think I've got a book somewhere about this old line. I'll have to read it up again. I haven't read it for some time. Transport for Wales service. And I believe I'm right in saying those Class 175s are no longer in service. Seem to be eating up the route miles quite quickly, and we'll be there very, very quickly. took Dovetail Games quite a while to re-release this route, because the original one was full of Virgin trains branding, and they had the Virgin liveried Voyager, only for Virgin to stop operating trains, and that kind of was the end of the agreement with Dovetail Games, so they cancelled the route immediately. Of course, if you still owned it, you could still use it, but for many people they couldn't buy it, and that was a bit of a nuisance because Crewe Station wasn't very easy to obtain the asset, and of course that's used on other routes such as the Missing Link. Thankfully, in the last couple of years they've re-released it now in Transport for Wales guise, and of course we do have the Voyager. I still call them Voyagers personally, but in Avanti West Coast livery. And this reskin of this Class 805 that came from Semaphore Simulation. To do this full run to Holyhead, I've adapted just 3 of the base scenarios that came with the game. I almost forgot there that I've got the bigger size hood on the screen, not very appealing. Call it the old Fisher Price hood. We are on the approach to Crewe. Lovely place to visit. Classic historic old town, well, city, and a walk along the River Dee as well. Very nice. Was a bit too quick to ease the speed limit down, because that 30-mile-an-hour marker isn't for a little distance off yet. Just about half a mile away from Crewe. Crewe? We've left Crewe. Chester even, platform 3. And the signal indicating that we are signalled into platform 3. There's all sorts of lines emanating out from Chester. We've just had the Manchester line coming in from our right, and it's perfectly possible to do a run from Manchester Victoria or even Piccadilly with that backdated route that we have available. I think there is a British Rail blue version of this route as well. Now, does that really fit the whole of the train into the platform? No, I think not. We're going to have to ignore the markings. Although having said that, it still says 0.00, so no, I think we're all right. Essentially, we're coming towards the end of the platform. Can't see any platform markers actually here. So here we are at Chester. Okay, well, we've got the always catches me out. This thing is, if we've got the speed control on, then needless to say, we're not going to get much out of it unless we've actually got the speed set to something. If we've got it set at 0, then it's not going to move, is it? So we ease our way out of Chester. We've just got 12 miles or so to our first stop at Flint. That will be taking us into Wales. Now we've got the historic Chester in the background. Whole succession of tunnels as well in this early part of the journey out of Chester. And I believe if we look outside, and you can see it on the left, we have Chester Racecourse there, nicely represented. You can clearly see the track. Certainly our free videos on YouTube of the run, certainly, well, both Crewe to Chester and Crewe to Holyhead as well. Well, Chester to Holyhead. I think it might even be one of Don Coffey's. Well worth a watch. Yeah, we've got that up to 75. That's our current line speed. Although I can tell you that Flint's in Wales, I can't tell you exactly where the English-Welsh border is. I've got a feeling that there's some sort of download that you can do where you put in the sign, but I suppose it's knowing exactly where to put it. Maybe it just puts it in the right place for you. I'll have to look that up at some point. We can't be too far away. I'm certainly not 100% sure when these services run in the summer, whether they will run as 10-car trains or whether they'll split at Chester. It's a nice unit to drive though. Nice feeling that you're driving something that's really bang up to date and very much helped with the Armstrong Powerhouse sound pack. Really adds to the general ambience. And also you feel the controls that are just very reactive. I mean, I was driving the Class 33 on the West Somerset Railway in the last upload on YouTube, but that was very different. You applied power, you applied the brakes, and you had to wait a few seconds for the train to react, and it's quite a challenge in a way doing that. But it's also nice to drive one of these modern, really up-to-date units where you feel fully in control. Even I can drive it. And sometimes these speed limits just seem a bit arbitrarily slow in many ways. I mean, you're looking at a really straight stretch of track. Why is it only 75 at this moment? Have our first advancement to 90 coming up fairly soon. That's at Chester anyway. So is it Shotton, is it? I've forgotten some of the other station names. In all the years I've owned this route, I can't remember how many times I've done the full run from Crewe to Holyhead. Not too many times. Try 90, not 95. Not even sure on the whole stretch between Crewe and Holyhead that we get faster than 90. Is there any 100-mile-an-hour sections? I really can't remember. I think we must be into Wales now. We're only 2.5 miles away from the first stop at Flint. It's kind of one of those situations where we basically got through to mph, and then we've got the first stop. I might need to adjust the settings slightly on this controller. Doesn't seem quite right. We don't seem to have a 0 in there. Go at altering that when we get to Flint. I'll just say 10-car marker, so it must happen sometime. That might be more like it. I've altered it to 5 notches in either direction, so hopefully that should be a bit better for us. So that was Flint, and we're into Wales, and by the time we get to Prestatyn, then we're very much going to be in the heart of the North Wales coast, so we'll get our first glimpse of the sea, and I think we have the first real sight of the A55 on our left as well, which is very much going to hug the coastline and hug the railway as well for much of the journey. A few cars that suddenly just magically appeared there. No, we don't want 105, do we? What's better? 90. And there we have first sight of the coast. That's why they call this the North Wales Coastal. Of course, very much areas for people to visit from Manchester, from Liverpool, from the potteries as well, and you'll see plenty of caravan parks as we head towards Prestatyn and Rhyl and Colwyn Bay, and then into Llandudno. I know there has been one or two attempts to modify this route and bring it a little bit more up to standard. I know not everybody thinks it's perfect. I think I've mentioned before though on some of these runs, the problem is if you know the route absolutely inside out, you know all the locations really well, then you want to get it just right. Nice to see the old semaphore signals as well. And again, and this is so typical of the North Wales coast route, we've got the go ahead to 90 and then we drop down to 75 again very soon after. Should be sounding our horns for those footpaths across the track. See too many whistle boards. saw the semaphore signal return to the danger position as well after we passed it. But I don't know what it is about riding on the train beside the seaside. It's very, very beautiful, and probably the best examples. This is one of the best ones really, this run from along the North Wales coast. You can go along the Cambrian coast, that's a lovely ride through the likes of Aberdyfi and Barmouth, and eventually onto Pwllheli. And of course the ultimate one, perhaps Brunel's route through Dawlish on the through Devon and then ultimately into Cornwall. And the Dawlish one's even more spectacular because you can see many examples down the years of waves crashing against the trains as they've gone past. And of course we had that big storm a few years back and you saw the track hanging in the air. It's kind of not ideal from a regular traveller's point of view when that sort of thing can happen, but it's certainly beautiful to travel on. It's just the contrast. It's quite chilled out and relaxing to go on these long runs. Enjoying the intensity of the high frequency drives in the middle of the city, and we'll have the London Overground one to have a ride on soon with Gospel Oak to Barking Riverside. Well, there's the aforementioned caravans. And we have to keep an eye on the fact that Prestatyn is very close by now, and it will be followed in quick succession by Rhyl and then Colwyn Bay, and then Llandudno's not too far behind. Yeah, definitely helps with having the 5-notch throttle mode on the train sim controller. Well worth getting, incidentally. It's quite costly, but it really does give you that immersive feel of operating the train rather than doing it from the keyboard. You get the impression sometimes of some of these stations along this route of the big holiday excursion traffic that used to exist, and there's still a fair few holiday makers that use them in the summer, but not quite from the days of old, of steam and even into the early diesel era. The reskin is a download from Semaphore Sim, and very much represents these new units, and this service is set to take place in the summer of 2024. As I record this, we're at the end of February 2024. I think it will be quite an advancement over the current Voyager Class 221 trains on this service. Travelling on a Class 802 over the weekend on a journey to Newcastle, and hopefully I'll get some clips of that uploaded quite soon as well of the day out. But very comfortable even in standard class, but the seats are a little bit on the hard side, I have to say. More caravan parks, and travelling towards Rill reminds me very much of the childhood and holidays in and around this area. I think for many years Rill's felt a little bit run down, but they seem to have spent a bit of money on the seafront in recent times, so it's quite a bit tidier than it used to be. Bit concerned to see a red signal there, because sorry, a yellow signal, because have we got a red signal approaching? Is that just because of the routing into Rill, hopefully? More recent years I've paid a visit to the Rill Air Show as well, and that's quite a decent day out. Now, I think we're alright, aren't we? We've got a yellow and the indicator routing us into platform 2. There's still the opportunity to route trains not stopping at Rill through on the middle road. Again, you can see this grand old station. That should just about do us, I would hope. Yeah, if you look out, you can see the old town and the seaside. And again, I think it's kind of slightly represented in terms of, it's not really a beach, is it? And you haven't really got properly the seafront represented, but you get the feeling as far as looking back from the station, I suppose. So, Colwyn Bay, the next stop. So a little bit further on. I think we've got, is it Abergalley and Pensarn, I think, is the next station, but we're not stopping there. Crossing over the estuary now. You can kind of see why we had the 3 tracks through Rill station. Chance for anything stopping at Rill to be held and for a through train to pass through. Plenty of holiday bungalows as well as the caravan parks. And some of these areas you've got routes to the beach that actually cross the railway tracks, but here you've got the footbridges. Just as you think we've got a reasonably fast speed limit, we're dropping down to 75 again. Certainly gets a bit more hilly on the next set. It's the next stage. It's been very flat. This is Abergele and Pensarn. But there's certainly plenty of services that stop at more of these stations between Crewe and Holyhead, and the Transport for Wales services. And when we get to Llandudno, you can take the ride up the Great Orme, either in a tram or a cable car. And it's nice that, as well as Llandudno Junction that we'll be stopping at, the branch through to Llandudno is also represented as well. Many people quite thrilled when this Crewe to Holyhead route came out, and now that it's possible to do the full run from London Euston to Holyhead, that's something in its own right. I'm guessing in reality probably a driver would take a break at Crewe. I can't imagine that they would do the full run to Holyhead from London Euston. The A55 again is our friend on the left. There are parts of Colwyn Bay that have a older feel to it. never checked to see whether there is any freight traffic on this run. There would be in real life. Still a bit of a dearth of North Wales coast runs in this modern time. I couldn't actually find a modern one with the Avanti West Coast trains other than the ones that came out of the pack, and just modify this slightly to include this 805. Nice detail to see the station names both in English and Welsh. Here we are at Colwyn Bay. You can see the old pier as well. I think they made a bit more of an effort to represent the seafront here. So the next stop is Llandudno Junction. And it's less than 5 miles away. Certainly a lovely old place. Llandudno has that classic old English resort feel about it. It remains classy, nothing tacky about it at all. Bit too busy perhaps on a very hot day in the middle of summer, but it remains a place of charm. It's gone quiet again. I think in reality what Dovetail Games have done is to reserve the places for the cars passing for when you can really see it clearly, like now, and that works pretty well, and it does feel pretty busy there. Certainly works with me. And sort of frame rate wise, well, I've got it up in the top left hand corner. You can't complain at that. It's running very, very smooth. And then I think when we get to Llandudno Junction, we're less than an hour away to Holyhead itself. We'll cross the Britannia Bridge into Anglesey in the latter stages. Just trying to take this steady for the drop down to 50. Well, we have to be a little bit mindful that the platforms at Llandudno Junction not too far away now. And bear in mind this should be a midsummer's evening. Still bright sunshine, 6 o'clock in the at night time as we are approaching Llandudno Junction. Or should we say Llandudno? Or is it Llandudno? If I remember, we'll talk about the old famous Landfair Go 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 when we approach it in Anglesey, but it's slightly fake. We are at Llandudno Junction. So we are very much on the last leg with just Bangor and then Holyhead left to go on our journey. And we are due away at 18:03. And a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit out at Llandudno Junction, but again, with the up and down nature of the speed limits on this line, it's very quickly down to 45. You've got the line there on the right branching away to Llandudno itself, which is right close to the popular seaside resort itself. Really is a lovely part of the world. And here we have an interesting feature, because this is Conway, and this bridge is not part of Conway Castle itself, despite the appearance. This was the idea by Robert Stevenson, the railway engineer who built this line, and he kind of thought, well, let's build something that's in keeping with the castle itself and make it part of the landscape, which was quite advanced for the 1800s. And it's the same, it's true, as this arch over the station as well. Again, it's not part of the castle itself. I've read a bit more on the speed control, and it doesn't work completely perfectly in diesel mode, which I assume is as per reality. I think that the idea is in electric mode, if you're on a downhill gradient and it starts to go over the speed limit, the train will automatically brake, but I don't think that happens in diesel mode. So we're less than 15 miles away from our first stop in this section, the last part of the run, Bangor. See the different ideas with the road. You've got the A55 up there, and I presume a lot of this must have been reworked when they built the dual carriageway. You can see the road side tunnel there, and the railway tunnel's a bit lower. With the speed set anyway, I tend to try and not bother with it too much if the speed limit is pretty similar. And it's not a very it's a short section in any case. As ever, we have to wait for the whole of the train to clear the section before we can achieve maximum speed. There's nice little touches like that, the boat, and you can see the reflection. It looks pretty nicely done. I know sometimes the graphics engine is a little bit old school, really. It's from the late 90s and it's been kind of boosted a bit, but so it might not be up to the very latest in terms of graphic possibilities, and of course you get better graphics on Train Sim World. See the distinctive colours of an Aviva Wales bus there. Of course, they were once part of the railway network as well. Now Transport for Wales with the red and cream. Pretty much takes us all the way through to Holyhead. Yeah, I think this is a downward gradient, so I don't think the speed set would work too well on this bit. It's quite interesting with the recent route that came out, the Bernina line. Of course, that's got huge gradients. So very important in those situations, that nowadays anyway, that you've got a train where you don't have to just rely on the driver applying the brakes all the time. I'd love to know with these sections as well, is this as per reality? Because I know the speed limits keep changing, but would the driver really go up towards 90 mile an hour knowing that it was 75 very quickly? But then you kind of think, well, the timetable might dictate that being a necessity. To say, doing this run, it's kind of made me think I must take the train from Crewe through to Holyhead. I've never done it in reality. Read plenty about it, read books, I've watched the videos, I've ridden it on the train game, but nice to experience it in real life. It's always a lovely, relaxing experience travelling on the train by the sea. When you think back to part one of the video and the run from London Euston through to Crewe, such a different experience. You think of the massive traffic out of London Euston, climbing up Camden Bank with all the huge expansive buildings. To the open countryside. Too far away from our stop at Bangor. There's a bit of a slower section, it has to be said, between sort of Llandudno Junction and Holyhead overall. There's lots of 75 running. Remains an important route for freight, for onward travel for passengers to the port at Holyhead for the ferries across to Dublin and to Ireland. was the Morpeth board reminder for the reduction in speed to some 15 miles an hour for access to the station. Platform 2. The Morpeth board thing's a bit interesting because they were brought in as a reminder to drivers about significant drops in speed. It's called Morpeth because of the Morpeth train accident in the 1980s involving the sleeper on the big bend into Morpeth station. But I think ironically there wasn't one at Morpeth for a while afterwards. I'm sure I read something along those lines. We're approaching platform 2 at Bangor. Of course, the cathedral city. Of course, any conurbation with a cathedral in the UK, if it's got a cathedral, then it's automatically a city. It's a university city as well. A little bit overly cautious with the speed drop, but better to be getting down a bit early than too late. Some of these stations on this North Wales coast route have a real feeling of grandeur and perhaps from times gone by, because not quite the traffic of old. It's still obviously very popular touristy wise in the summer, but just a slight feeling of times gone by. I'm sure if the station was rebuilt in modern times, it would be done on a much more basic style. That's your doers. Just look at the representation of the city of Bangor. I'm sure it's a little bit more limited, a bit more generic than what it is in real life, but it gives you the flavour. Not totally sure where the cathedral's meant to be. There's a generic looking Crewe church there, but you can't massively see it from the station, so we'll say that's okay. I know there's a big plan to revamp the North Wales coast line for train sim with somebody that's been working on it for a number of years, and hopefully that will see the light of day. And I mean, to my eye it feels pretty decent, but I'm no great expert on the line. But if you know it absolutely inside out, then there can be bits that are slightly infuriating when they're wrong. So we're very much on the periphery of entering the Isle of Anglesey. We're not too far away now. football stadium. Of course, it could be rugby. Of course, Wales famous for rugby, maybe not so much in North Wales. Not that I know masses about it. It looked like football as it's been represented anyway. And this section, as we go through the Menai Strait and then ultimately through the Britannia Bridge into Anglesey, is quite slow. Mentioned Robert Stevenson as being the chief engineer on the line. I think it's between Chester and Holyhead, and he of course was the son of George Stevenson, more famous for building the rocket. And of course this Robert Stevenson, not to be confused with the Robert Louis Stevenson of Treasure Island fame. This is where we go single track, and we'll shortly be encountering the Britannia Bridge. Another superb example of engineering, so many in the UK. Doesn't look too dramatic from down here. Single track. But then have a look from up above, and of course you've got the A55 crossing the river into Anglesey. That's quite something. Was heavily rebuilt in 1970 after a big fire. So it's not quite the original Robert Stevenson creation. So we're going back to double track. I think the only reason, well, there's a couple of reasons I think why it was single track, and one of those simply for sort of maintenance reasons, but also, as I understand it, from the load bearing point of view as well, and it'd be a bit too much to have the two trains going over at the same time. Bear in mind all the traffic going overhead as well on the A55. I think we have an interesting station coming up. We'll have a look at that sign. Look at that for a moment. Now, as I understand it, it's a bit of a con really, and it was sort of Victorian marketing in the 1800s, because it's kind of Llanfair Puth. Well, I'm certainly no good at pronouncing Welsh, with a Gwyn Gwyl on the end, and that's as far as it should be really, but they've added in some bits. And it was basically as a bit of a tourist attraction, and it stayed to this day. The place itself and the surrounding area is not called that at all. It's just known as land, and I think the signal box just beyond the station just says Landfair PB power box. But I think I'm pretty much right in saying that it's more or less 75 mile an hour for the rest of the journey, really. Well, okay, we've got a drop to 60, but I think 75 is just about our top speed for the journey through Anglesey. All the time I've owned this piece of DLC, I don't think I've done the full run from Crewe to Holyhead that many times. There's some really good Armstrong powerhouse scenarios with the likes of the Class 37, more sort of classic traction, which I must give myself a go at some point. Not 100% sure if the semaphores are all still in place. Quite bring myself to ride one of the Class 221 that they use on this route. We've seen one or two go past us. The sound pack isn't quite up to Armstrong powerhouse standards now. It's quite an old one. I don't think there's much enthusiasm about a new one being developed. Could get one on Train Sim World for the Midland main line. The closing stages of the journey relatively. We're going to pass through Bedorgan. There's still a few miles after that to our final arrival into Holyhead. Totally sure the reasons why the speed control works differently in diesel mode, but I presume that's the way it works in real life. Nice to see those spectacular outside views, but of course you can't tell what speed you're doing exactly, so I was trying to make sure I wasn't over speeding, and then you come back and find that you're way under. Quite a large expanse, Anglesey. Lovely little stations. I mean, sometimes you just feel they're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I'm trying to set up this run. I mean, I've used one of the standard ones that came with the TFW North Wales Coast route, and I couldn't find anything other than that run all the way from Crewe to Holyhead with the new sort of Avanti period, and it just didn't seem right to me if we got a Virgin train liveried 221s going past us and the like. So I could have swapped the stock out, of course, but with the time that's allowed, I've just used the standard one. But I think we missed a few. Would have been nice to have had a few freight services coming in the other direction. Very undulating, this route. kind of transport yourself to the summer when these trains should be in active service. Of course, not guaranteed yet, but that's the understanding. And if you're watching this several months later, you might be thinking, well, they're already in active service. Holyhead itself, not exactly renowned for its natural beauty. Of course, it's heavily industrial, huge port area, and very much a working environment. Got some lovely places in and around Anglesey itself. Certainly enjoyed the ride. Contrasting speed and everything else. Now, I know that just before Holyhead, and I think that was it, I think that was Valley Station, there's RAF Valley in the vicinity. That's where you see a lot of the Hawks and where the current Prince of Wales, Prince William, was trained. I think there's a power station as well in this area which generates a lot of freight traffic. I mean, that's a fascinating piece of engineering all round, isn't it? Need to keep an eye on that speed because we've got that 15 mile an hour to enter platform 2 at Holyhead, our final destination. See the busy traffic coming in and out of the port of Holyhead. See the speed limit board, circular board, just coming up, so we should be just about the right speed. So as we're about to come into the platforms and our final destination, I've thoroughly enjoyed the trip, and if you've got the time and you haven't watched it, I would recommend you have a look at part 1, or the full run from London Euston to Crewe, and very much a different journey. Same train, electric power, a lot of 125 mph running. And a sprawling little station, Holyhead. I think we are coming under the canopies. You've got the platform to the right, which is out in the open. See the port buildings in the background as well, nicely represented in the game. Well, I hope you very much have enjoyed the run. I've certainly enjoyed it yet again, and apologies it's taken so long. It was about 2 months ago since I uploaded part 1, so it's probably the longest tea break in history. But if you get the chance and you've enjoyed it, then if you could like and subscribe it, that'll help enormously. Must be summer given the clothing of the passengers. Let's get a quick look outside and see all the port buildings and everything nicely modelled and represented. Some great detail in there, really. So that's it from me. Hope you've enjoyed it, and until next time, it's bye-bye.